Disclaimer: the story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life experiences. Names, characters, and events have been changed to protect privacy. Some situations may contain sensitive content. Reader discretion is advised. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind where the city hummed with the usual rhythm of rushing footsteps, honking cars, and the faint aroma of fresh coffee wafting from the corner cafes. I had my headphones in, lost in a playlist that made the world feel slightly softer, slightly more bearable. My mind was preoccupied with deadlines and the mundane worries of life, the kind that seemed important in the moment but faded into nothing by the end of the day. I was walking down Fifth Avenue, my eyes flicking between the cracked pavement and the street signs, when something, or rather someone, made me stop mid-step. He was leaning against a lamppost, the kind of person who somehow stood out without trying. There was a calmness in the way he watched the city move around him, a quiet patience that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the streets. I noticed his eyes first, sharp yet kind, as though they carried stories of their own. Our eyes met briefly, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough to make my heart skip. I shook my head slightly, convincing myself it was just a random glance, nothing more. Yet, as I continued walking, I couldn't help but feel that invisible pull, the one that tells you that something or someone important has just crossed your path. Later that day, fate seemed determined to intervene. I was at my usual coffee shop, the one with the creaky floorboards and the barista who remembered everyone's orders. I was scrolling through my phone when I felt a shadow fall over my table. Looking up, my breath caught. There he was, smiling awkwardly, holding a cup of coffee as if it was a lifeline. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. His voice was calm, low, and strangely comforting. I nodded, words failing me for reasons I couldn't understand. As he settled into the chair across from me, the world outside seemed to blur. For the first time in a long time, I felt fully present, fully alive, and yet slightly vulnerable, as though opening a door I didn't know existed inside myself. We started talking, initially small talk, mundane questions about work and weather, but there was an ease to it that felt extraordinary. Time slipped by unnoticed, the noise of the cafe fading into a gentle hum. I found myself laughing at things I didn't normally laugh at and sharing thoughts I normally kept buried. There was an unspoken understanding, a silent acknowledgement that something important was happening between us. It wasn't dramatic or over the top. It was subtle, tender, and utterly unforgettable. By the time we parted ways that afternoon, I knew my life had shifted, even if I couldn't put a finger on exactly how. The encounter had planted a seed of curiosity, a question I didn't yet have the courage to ask. Who was this person, and why did meeting him feel like a turning point in my otherwise ordinary life? Walking home, I couldn't stop smiling, even as the city's chaos tried to pull me back into reality. Something extraordinary had begun, and I had no idea how far it would take me. The days that followed our first meeting felt surreal. Every small interaction with him, whether it was a brief message or a coincidental glance on the street, carried a weight I couldn't explain. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper, an inexplicable resonance that made the world seem sharper, more vivid. When our conversations began, they weren't forced or awkward, they flowed naturally, like two streams converging into one steady river. I found myself anticipating his texts, replaying snippets of our discussions in my head, and marveling at the ease with which we shared pieces of ourselves that we usually kept hidden. It became clear that he understood me in a way no one else had. There was no judgment in his curiosity, no pressure to perform or pretend. He asked questions that made me think, not just about him, but about myself, my dreams, my regrets, and the little details I often overlooked in the rush of daily life. In return, I listened to him, discovering layers of vulnerability beneath his calm exterior. He spoke of past mistakes, fleeting moments of joy, and personal philosophies that painted a picture of someone both complex and approachable. Every story he shared added depth to the connection we were building, a connection that already felt unlike anything I had experienced before. Our interactions weren't limited to texts and calls. We started meeting more frequently. Each encounter carried a quiet intensity, a magnetic pull that drew us closer without overtly demanding it. A shared coffee at a local cafe, a walk through a park in the late afternoon, even casual conversations while waiting in line for groceries, all became opportunities to connect in subtle, meaningful ways. I began noticing small details about him, the way his eyes lit up when he laughed, the nervous gesture of tapping his fingers when deep in thought, and the soft tone he used when speaking about things he cared about. These details etched themselves into my memory, making each meeting feel personal and unforgettable. There was also an emotional tension I couldn't ignore. It wasn't discomfort, but a quiet awareness that what we were experiencing was fragile, rare, and possibly fleeting. Every laugh, every glance, every shared secret carried a weight of significance. I caught myself wondering how it could be real, how someone could feel so familiar and new at the same time. It wasn't about rushing or forcing anything, it was about allowing the connection to exist and grow, unspoken yet undeniable. Despite the calm exterior, my mind raced constantly. I questioned my feelings, analyzed our conversations, and imagined future scenarios. It was thrilling and terrifying at the same time, like standing on the edge of a cliff, feeling the wind whip around me, and knowing that the leap could change everything. And yet, in his presence, all those fears melted away. I felt seen, understood, and strangely unguarded, an emotional openness I hadn't felt in years. By the end of that week, I realized that our connection wasn't just a fleeting encounter or a pleasant distraction. It was evolving into something more profound, a silent promise that our paths had crossed for a reason. The ordinary world felt transformed by our presence in each other's lives, and I couldn't help but wonder where this connection would lead, knowing already that it was destined to leave a lasting mark. The days following that unforgettable evening were unlike anything I had anticipated. Every routine task felt different, touched by the memory of that quiet moment in the gallery. Walking to work, buying groceries, even the mundane scrolling through social media seemed layered with a new significance. I caught myself replaying his gaze, the brush of his hand, the quiet intimacy of that shared silence, and I realized that my world had subtly shifted. Ordinary moments now carried echoes of something extraordinary, and I found it impossible to ignore the ripple effect his presence had begun to create in my life. Friends and family noticed the change before I did. I smiled more easily, laughed with a lighter heart, and spoke with an openness that hadn't been there before. Conversations that used to feel like chores were now opportunities to connect, to observe, to feel. Colleagues remarked that I seemed more focused yet somehow more relaxed, as if carrying an invisible energy that colored every interaction. Even strangers on the street seemed different, their faces and gestures more vivid, as if the world itself had sharpened in response to this new emotional resonance. But along with the exhilaration came a subtle tension. I found myself daydreaming at inconvenient moments, distracted by thoughts of him, wondering what he was doing and how he might be feeling. A simple text from him could lift my spirits or send me spiraling into uncertainty, depending on the tone and timing. There was a constant, quiet hum of anticipation, the kind that makes you both excited and nervous for no apparent reason. I realized that the emotional ripple he had created wasn't limited to joy. It brought vulnerability, uncertainty, and a strange self-awareness that I hadn't expected. Even my internal world began to shift. I reflected on my past relationships and experiences, noticing patterns I hadn't confronted before. The way I approached friendships, love, and trust was suddenly up for reevaluation. I questioned what I truly wanted, what I was willing to risk, and how open I could allow myself to be. This ripple effect wasn't just external. It penetrated deep into my psyche, challenging long-held beliefs and assumptions about connection, intimacy, and timing. Every decision I made seemed subtly influenced by the presence of this one person in my life, whether I acknowledged it or not. And yet, there was beauty in the unpredictability. I began to embrace the uncertainty, recognizing that the changes weren't burdens but invitations to grow. Each ripple reminded me that life was not linear, that meaningful experiences could arrive unexpectedly and alter the trajectory of our paths forever. I felt a new sense of possibility, a reminder that the world could surprise me in ways I hadn't imagined. The connection we had forged was no longer confined to fleeting moments. It was seeping into every corner of my life, reshaping how I felt, how I acted, and even how I dreamed. By the end of the week, it was clear. The encounter in the gallery wasn't just a memory to cherish. It had become a catalyst. A single evening had touched so many aspects of my life, and I understood that this ripple effect would continue to shape me in ways I couldn't yet predict. Life felt richer, more vibrant, and charged with the quiet, persistent reminder that unforgettable moments had the power to transform ordinary existence into something extraordinary. As our connection deepened, there came a moment when the playful ease of our interactions gave way to a quiet seriousness. One evening, we found ourselves sitting on a park bench under the soft glow of street lamps, the city around us hushed and distant. The air carried a subtle chill, and I could sense that he had something on his mind. There was a hesitation in his posture, a slight tightness in his jaw that I hadn't noticed before. I waited patiently, unsure whether to speak or simply let the silence hold us together. Then, with a gentle sigh, he began to share something personal, something that had clearly weighed on him for years. He spoke of past mistakes and regrets, of moments when fear or indecision had kept him from pursuing what truly mattered. There was vulnerability in his voice, a raw honesty that made me both ache and admire him simultaneously. As he confessed, I realized that this person I had come to trust was opening a door that few ever let anyone enter. It was a level of openness I hadn't experienced before, and I felt an intense mixture of empathy and connection. I could see his humanity in a way that went beyond charm or attraction. I saw his fears, his hopes, and the tender fragility beneath his calm exterior. When it was my turn to speak, I felt a similar urge to reveal my own hidden truths. I shared experiences and memories I had kept tucked away, moments of vulnerability that I rarely voiced aloud. The conversation wasn't easy. There were pauses filled with the weight of unspoken emotions, but it created a bond that was both exhilarating and humbling. We weren't just talking anymore. We were unraveling layers of ourselves in real time, daring to trust the other with pieces that had long been guarded. And yet, with every revelation came uncertainty. The confessions, while beautiful and connecting, also carried the potential for discomfort. I wondered if I had shared too much, if the truths I revealed could shift the delicate balance we had built. Similarly, I sensed his hesitation, the careful navigation between honesty and fear of judgment. But in the end, that very tension, those moments of silent understanding, only strengthened the connection. It was proof that what we shared wasn't superficial. It was grounded in authenticity, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront our own flaws and fears. By the time the night ended, we had both bared parts of ourselves that few others had seen. There was a quiet intensity as we said our goodbyes, an unspoken recognition that what we had just shared would leave a lasting mark. The secrets and confessions didn't just reveal who we were individually, they revealed the depth of our connection and the potential for something far more meaningful than casual encounters. That evening became a defining moment, a reminder that true intimacy isn't about perfection or ease. It's about the courage to be real, even when it scares you. As I walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, I realized that the ripple effect of our relationship had grown deeper. The memories of our confessions lingered, shaping my thoughts, my emotions, and my understanding of what it meant to truly connect with someone. For the first time, I understood that unforgettable moments weren't just about excitement or romance. They were about honesty, trust, and the courage to reveal yourself fully. Life, as it often does, decided to test the delicate bond we had built. Just when our connection felt solid and unshakable, circumstances began to shift, introducing pressures neither of us had anticipated. It started subtly, a missed call here, a delayed response there, but soon, the external world began imposing itself more aggressively. Work deadlines, family obligations, and long-buried responsibilities collided, leaving little room for the quiet moments we had come to cherish. The challenge wasn't dramatic or sudden, it was insidious, creeping into our lives and demanding attention, threatening to dilute the intensity of what we shared. At first, We tried to navigate it with casual understanding, assuring each other that distance or distractions wouldn't matter. But beneath the surface, doubt began to creep in. I found myself questioning whether our bond could survive the pressures of reality. Every late message or postponed meeting triggered a tiny pang of insecurity. I wondered if he felt the same intensity one did, or if our connection was gradually fading into a memory that would one day feel bittersweet rather than transformative. These thoughts gnawed at me, making ordinary days heavy with unspoken tension. The turning point came during a particularly stressful week. A major project at work demanded all my focus, while he faced personal challenges of his own. We tried to maintain our usual communication, but fatigue and frustration began to leak into our conversations. Words were misinterpreted, intentions doubted, and small disagreements that would normally have been inconsequential became magnified. For the first time, I felt a real fear, the fear that the connection I had treasured so deeply could unravel, not because of a lack of feeling, but because life had complicated everything. It was in that moment of tension that I realized the challenge wasn't just external, it was internal. I had to confront my own insecurities, my tendency to overthink, and my fear of losing someone who had become so central to my emotional world. He, too, had to confront his own uncertainties, balancing personal responsibilities with the desire to nurture our bond. The challenge wasn't about blame or conflict. It was about growth, patience, and the willingness to fight for something meaningful when everything else seemed to compete for attention. After days of reflection and careful conversations, we began to face the challenge together. We set boundaries, communicated more openly about our struggles, and reminded each other why this connection mattered. The intensity didn't vanish, but it transformed into something steadier, more resilient. What had once felt fragile now carried the potential for endurance, proving that real connections aren't only about shared joy, they're about navigating difficulties together. By the end of that week, I understood that challenges, no matter how daunting, were part of what made our bond unforgettable. They tested our commitment, our patience, and our capacity for understanding. And in overcoming them, we discovered that the connection we shared wasn't fleeting. It was anchored in trust, resilience, and a depth of emotion that could withstand life's unpredictable trials. After days of uncertainty and quiet tension, the turning point arrived unexpectedly, as moments of clarity often do. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a sudden revelation, but a simple evening that carried the weight of transformation. We had agreed to meet at a small, quiet cafe, one that neither of us had been to before. The soft lighting, the gentle hum of conversations, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee created a cocoon-like atmosphere. Sitting across from each other, I could see the exhaustion of the past weeks reflected in his eyes, but beneath it, there was determination, a willingness to face the challenges that had tested us. As we spoke, the conversation shifted from everyday trivialities to the heart of what mattered. We discussed our fears, our expectations, and the unspoken doubts that had crept into our minds. There was an honesty that neither of us had fully expressed before, a vulnerability that was both terrifying and liberating. I realized in that moment that the turning point wasn't about resolving external problems. It was about acknowledging them together and committing to navigate them side by side. The act of facing the truth openly and without pretense created a powerful bond, one that felt stronger and more enduring than any fleeting excitement could provide. I remember the exact moment it crystallized. He reached across the table, lightly touching my hand, and said with quiet certainty, "Whatever comes, we'll figure it out together." Those words, simple yet profound, struck me like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't just about comfort or reassurance, it was a declaration of commitment, of emotional investment, and of courage. In that gesture, I felt the full weight of our journey so far, the initial spark, the unforgettable moments, the ripple effects, and even the secrets and challenges. It all converged into a single, undeniable truth. This connection had become a defining part of my life. The turning point also demanded action. We decided to be intentional about nurturing our relationship, setting aside time for each other despite life's demands. We learned to communicate more openly, to acknowledge doubts without letting them fester, and to celebrate the small victories that came from facing challenges together. It wasn't a perfect solution, nor was it a guarantee that life would become easier. But it was a conscious choice to prioritize the bond we had forged, to protect it and allow it to grow in a healthy, sustainable way. By the end of the evening, I felt a profound sense of relief and clarity. The uncertainty that had haunted me for weeks lifted, replaced by a quiet confidence that we were moving forward with intention and understanding. The turning point wasn't a single dramatic event. It was the accumulation of trust, courage, and shared vulnerability that transformed our connection from something fragile and tentative into something resilient and enduring. It was a reminder that the most unforgettable moments often arise not from grand gestures, but from quiet decisions to face life together, fully and honestly. Weeks turned into months, and yet the memory of that turning point remained vivid, etched into the fabric of my daily life. Looking back, I realized that every step of our journey had led to this quiet, enduring understanding. The initial spark, the unforgettable moment in the gallery, the ripple effects of our connection, the confessions, and the challenges, all of it had built toward something far greater than either of us had imagined. Life had tested us, shaped us, and ultimately strengthened the bond that now felt inseparable from who I had become. I often found myself reflecting on how this experience had changed me. I was more open, more patient, and more attuned to the beauty of ordinary moments. I appreciated subtle gestures, fleeting glances, and unspoken understanding in ways I hadn't before. Even mundane routines, making breakfast, walking to work, or catching up with friends, were colored by a quiet awareness of what it meant to truly connect with another person. The lessons weren't dramatic, they were gentle, woven into the rhythm of daily life, but their impact was profound. The lasting memory wasn't confined to specific events, but lingered in the way I approached the world. I had learned to embrace vulnerability, to speak honestly about my feelings, and to trust that meaningful connections could survive life's uncertainties. I recognized the importance of patience, of understanding that the most profound relationships weren't built overnight, but through shared experiences, empathy, and a willingness to grow together. In this reflection, I saw the true value of our story. It wasn't about fleeting excitement, but about enduring impact, the kind that leaves a permanent imprint on your heart. Even now, I catch myself recalling moments that seem almost cinematic in their clarity: the brush of his hand in the gallery, the quiet confession on the park bench, the soft reassurance in the cafe. Each memory carries emotion, lessons, and a sense of wonder that refuses to fade. They remind me that life's most unforgettable stories often arrive unexpectedly, in moments that seem ordinary until you look closer. The beauty lies in noticing, in allowing yourself to be fully present, and in embracing the unpredictability of human connection. In the end, the story isn't only about him or me, it's about the way life's encounters can transform us, leaving traces that shape our perceptions, decisions, and emotions long after the moments have passed. It is a testament to the power of genuine connection, of vulnerability, and of courage. The experience continues to resonate, a constant reminder that unforgettable moments aren't always grand or dramatic. They are often quiet, subtle, and profound, shaping us in ways we may only fully understand with time. As I move forward, I carry the memory with me, a touchstone for what is possible when you open yourself to life and to others. It was so unforgettable, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, an indelible story from life that will remain with me, shaping every encounter, every choice, and every heartbeat in the days yet to come. 17.